They didn't see you. Not really. You were there, breathing, trying, showing up. But to them, you were background noise. A shadow in a crowded room. Someone easy to overlook, easy to forget. You spoke and they talked over you. You tried and they dismissed you. You existed, but it felt like you didn't matter. And the worst part, it wasn't just them. After a while, you started doing it to yourself. You started shrinking your voice before anyone else could silence it. You started lowering your expectations before anyone else could disappoint you. You started believing that maybe, just maybe, you were meant to stay invisible. That's how it begins. Not with failure, not with weakness, but with quiet acceptance. Acceptance of less. Acceptance of being overlooked. Acceptance of becoming small in a world that only respects presence. But something inside you never agreed. No matter how many times you were ignored, no matter how many times you were pushed aside, there was always that voice, soft but persistent, telling you, this isn't who you are. And that voice, that discomfort, that restlessness you couldn't explain, that was the beginning of your transformation. Because invisible people don't feel that fire. Invisible people don't question their place. Invisible people don't feel something clawing inside their chest saying, you were meant for more. You did. And that's where everything changes. See, being invisible teaches you things that attention never could. It teaches you how to observe, how to read people, how to understand silence, tension, energy. While others were busy being seen, you were busy learning. While they chased validation, you built awareness. While they depended on applause, you learned how to stand alone. And slowly, quietly, without anyone noticing, you started becoming dangerous. Because there's nothing more powerful than someone who was ignored and used that time to grow. At first, it doesn't look like much. Just small changes. You start thinking differently. You stop reacting the same way. You begin questioning things you once accepted. You stop chasing approval. That's the first shift. Because the invisible version of you was always trying to be accepted, trying to fit in, trying to be liked. But the unstoppable version, it doesn't beg for a seat. It builds its own table. You begin to realize that being ignored wasn't your weakness. It was your training ground. All those moments you felt alone. They taught you independence. All those times you were doubted. They forced you to rely on yourself. All that silence. It sharpened your mind, and then comes the moment. Not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable. The moment you decide enough waiting to be noticed. Enough shrinking to make others comfortable. Enough pretending you don't feel what you feel. That decision, that's where invisibility dies. From that point on, everything changes. You walk differently. Not because the world changed, but because you did. Your shoulders don't drop anymore. Your eyes don't avoid contact anymore. Your voice doesn't shake the same way. There's something new in you. Something steady. Something controlled. You're not loud. You don't need to be. Because presence isn't about noise. It's about certainty. And now you have it. People start noticing. At first, they can't explain it. They just feel it. That shift in your energy. That calm intensity. That quiet confidence that wasn't there before. They start paying attention. Not because you asked them to, but because they have no choice. Because something about you doesn't match who you used to be. You're not trying to impress anyone anymore. And that's exactly what makes you impressive. You don't react to everything. And that makes your reactions matter more. You don't speak all the time. And that makes your words heavier. You don't chase attention. And somehow it starts chasing you. That's the transition, from invisible to undeniable. But don't get it twisted. This isn't about revenge. It's not about proving people wrong. That's a small mindset. This is about becoming so aligned with your own power that external validation becomes irrelevant. Because here's the truth. The moment you stop needing to be seen is the moment you become impossible to ignore. You're no longer performing. You're no longer pretending. You're no longer adjusting yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. You are simply being. Fully, completely, unapologetically, and that kind of presence. It disrupts everything. It challenges people. It makes them uncomfortable because they remember the version of you that was easy to overlook. And now they don't recognize you. Good. They're not supposed to. Because that version of you, it had to disappear. It had to be buried under experience, under pain, under growth, so this version could rise. The version that understands silence but isn't defined by it. The version that knows rejection but isn't weakened by it. The version that walked through invisibility and came out sharper, stronger, and unshakable. Now when you enter a room, you don't ask, "Do I belong here?"
You already know.
Now when someone doubts you, you don't feel the need to explain yourself. You let your actions speak. Now when life throws pressure at you, you don't collapse. You absorb it, because pressure built you. It didn't break you. And here's the final shift. You stop seeing yourself as someone who was ignored and start seeing yourself as someone who was preparing for this version of you. The one who doesn't wait. The one who doesn't hesitate. The one who doesn't question their worth every 5 minutes. The one who moves with intention, speaks with precision, and thinks with clarity. That's unstoppable. Not loud success. Not flashy confidence, but controlled power. The kind that doesn't need permission. The kind that doesn't need validation. The kind that doesn't fade. So if you're still in that phase, where you feel unseen, where you feel overlooked, where it feels like no one notices your effort, good, stay there a little longer. But don't stay passive. Use it, build in it, grow in it. Because invisibility, when used right, is the perfect place to transform. And when you step out of it, you won't just be seen. You'll be remembered. Pain doesn't ask for permission before it enters your life. It doesn't knock. It doesn't warn you. It just arrives and suddenly everything feels heavier. Your thoughts, your days. And at first, you try to escape it. You distract yourself. You tell yourself it's temporary. You pretend it doesn't affect you. But it lingers. Because pain has a purpose of whether you accept it or not. Most people treat pain like an enemy. Something to run from. Something to silence. They numb it with distractions. They bury it under temporary comfort. They hide from it like it's something shameful. And that's why it controls them. Because what you refuse to face will always have power over you. But there's another way, a way most people avoid because it's uncomfortable. You turn around and face it. Not with fear, not with resistance, but with awareness. You sit with it. You feel it fully. The anger, the disappointment, the rejection, the emptiness that makes everything feel meaningless. You stop labeling it as weakness. And you start seeing it for what it really is, a raw energy, because that's all pain is. Energy that hasn't been understood yet. Energy that hasn't been directed yet. Energy waiting to be used. Think about it. Every time you've been hurt, didn't something inside you react? A surge.
Attention?
A fire. That's not destruction. That's potential. But here's where most people lose. They let that energy explode in the wrong direction. They turn it into anger at others. They turn it into self-doubt. They turn it into giving up. And just like that, the same pain that could have built them breaks them. Not because pain is powerful, but because it was misused. Pain is like fire. Leave it uncontrolled, it burns everything. Control it, it forges steel. So the question isn't, why am I in pain? The real question is, what am I going to do with it? Because pain will give you 2 choices every single time. You either let it define you, or you let it refine you. There's no middle ground. When you feel rejected, you can either believe you're not enough, or you can become someone who doesn't need approval. When you feel alone, you can either sink into loneliness, or you can build strength in solitude. When life hits you, you can either collapse or you can adapt. And adaptation, that's where power is born. Because every time you choose growth over reaction, you take control. You stop being a victim of your emotions and start becoming the architect of them. That doesn't mean pain disappears. It doesn't mean you suddenly feel nothing. No, you feel it even deeper. But now it doesn't control you. Now it fuels you. That anger you feel, turn it into discipline. That frustration, turn it into focus. That sadness, turn it into self-awareness. Because hidden inside every negative emotion is direction. Anger tells you something matters. Sadness tells you something is missing. Fear tells you something needs to be faced. But most people never listen, they just react. And reaction keeps you stuck. Power comes from response, from control, from choosing what that energy becomes. That's the shift, from pain to power. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's built in moments, small ones. When you feel like giving up, but you keep going. When you feel like breaking, but you stay composed. When your mind starts attacking you, but you don't believe everything it says. That's strength, not perfection. Not being emotionless, but being in control, even when everything inside you feels chaotic. And over time, something incredible happens. The things that once hurt you start strengthening you. Rejection stops feeling personal and starts feeling like redirection. Failure stops feeling like the end and starts feeling like feedback. Pain stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like preparation. You begin to see patterns. You begin to understand yourself. You begin to realize nothing you went through was wasted. Every scar taught you something. Every setback shaped you. Every moment of darkness forced you to grow. And suddenly, you're not afraid of pain anymore, because you know what it does. You know what it builds. You know what it reveals. You understand that comfort doesn't create strength. Struggle does. Pressure does. Pain does. That's why the strongest people aren't the ones who had it easy. They're the ones who learned how to use what hurt them. They didn't avoid the fire. They walked through it. And instead of being destroyed, they came out forged sharper, stronger, unbreakable. Now, when pain shows up, you don't panic. You don't run. You don't ask, why me? You ask, what is this here to teach me? And that question alone changes everything. Because now pain isn't your enemy, it's your teacher, your trainer, your fuel. So feel it. Don't suppress it. Don't ignore it. Don't pretend it's not there. Because the moment you stop running from pain is the moment you stop being controlled by it. And the moment you learn to control it is the moment you become powerful. Not fake strength, not temporary motivation, but real, grounded, unshakable power. The kind that doesn't disappear when things get hard. The kind that grows because things get hard. So let it hurt. Let it burn. Let it push you to your limits. But don't let it break you. Use it. Shape it. Turn it into something that works for you, not against you. Because in the end, pain was never there to destroy you. It was there to introduce you to a version of yourself that you would have never discovered any other way. There's something inside you that never went out. Not when they ignored you. Not when you failed. Not even when you felt like giving up. It got quieter, yes, maybe, hidden under doubt, fear, and exhaustion. But gone, never. That feeling you get sometimes. That restless energy you can't explain. That voice that shows up when everything else is silent. That's it. The fire. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. And it's been there longer than you think. Before the opinions. Before the pressure. Before the world started telling you who you should be, you had it. A natural intensity, a curiosity, a drive to move, to create, to become something. But life has a way of covering things up, layer by layer. Criticism, rejection, comparison, failure, each one like dust settling over a flame, and eventually, you start believing the fire is gone. You look at others and think they have something you don't. More confidence, more talent, more luck. But that's not true. They didn't get something you didn't. They just refused to let theirs die. Because here's the truth most people avoid. The fire doesn't disappear. It gets neglected, and anything neglected fades. Not because it's weak, but because it's not being fed. Your fire feeds on action, not thoughts, not intentions. Not one day, action. Even the smallest step fuels it. Every time you push yourself when you don't feel like it, it grows. Every time you face something uncomfortable instead of avoiding it, it grows. Every time you choose discipline over excuses, it grows. But the opposite is also true. Every time you hesitate, it dims. Every time you overthink, it weakens. Every time you listen to doubt instead of moving forward, it shrinks. And after a while, you don't trust it anymore. You question it. You start asking, what if I don't have what it takes? But that question, that's not reality. That's fear trying to protect you from effort, because the fire demands something most people avoid: consistency. It's not about one big moment, not about sudden motivation, not about waiting to feel ready. It's about showing up again and again, even when you don't feel anything at all. Especially then, because real fire isn't built on emotion. It's built on decision. A decision to move forward when it's hard. A decision to keep going when progress is slow. A decision to trust yourself when there's no guarantee. And that's where most people fall off. They wait for the spark. They wait to feel inspired. They wait for the perfect moment. But the fire doesn't respond to waiting. It responds to movement. You don't find it. You create it. And once you understand that, everything shifts. You stop looking outside for motivation. You stop comparing your journey to others. You stop expecting things to feel easy. Because now you know, the fire grows in resistance.
In challenge, in pressure.
In those moments where quitting feels like the easiest option, that's where it strengthens. That's where it transforms. And slowly, something changes. You begin to feel it again. Not as a sudden burst, but as a steady burn. A quiet confidence. A focused energy. A sense of direction that wasn't there before. You start trusting your steps. You stop second-guessing every move. You begin to understand yourself, your patterns, your limits, your potential. And that understanding, that's fuel. Because now you're not just moving randomly. You're moving with intention. Every action has weight. Every decision has purpose. You're not chasing something anymore. You're building it. From within. And that's what makes it powerful. Because external motivation fades. People lose interest. Situations change. Energy fluctuates. But internal fire, that stays. As long as you protect it. As long as you feed it. As long as you respect it. And protecting it means making choices others won't understand. It means saying no to distractions. It means walking away from things that drain you. It means staying focused when everything around you is trying to pull you off track. It's not easy. It's not comfortable. But it's necessary. Because the fire isn't meant to make you comfortable. It's meant to make you capable. Capable of handling pressure. Capable of staying disciplined. Capable of becoming someone who doesn't collapse when things get difficult. And once that capability is built, you become different. Not in a loud, obvious way, but in a grounded, undeniable way. You don't panic easily. You don't quit quickly. You don't lose yourself in chaos, because you know something others don't. You know what's inside you. You've felt it. You've built it. You've strengthened it. And no one can take that away. Not opinions, not setbacks, not failure. Because your fire doesn't depend on circumstances. It depends on you, your choices, your discipline, your mindset. And that's the final realization. You were never empty. You were never lacking. You were just disconnected from something that needed your attention. Something that needed your effort. Something that needed you to stop doubting and start doing. So if you feel lost, if you feel stuck, if you feel like you've lost that drive you once had, good, that means it's still there, waiting. Not for the perfect moment, not for the perfect plan, but for a decision. A decision to act, a decision to move, a decision to trust that even the smallest step forward is enough to bring it back. And once it's back, once that fire starts growing again, you won't need motivation. You won't need validation. You won't need anyone to push you, because you'll have something stronger, a force inside you that refuses to stop. For a long time, you weren't living as yourself. You were living as a reflection, a version shaped by expectations, by opinions, by silent pressure you didn't even realize you were carrying. You adjusted your tone so people would accept you. You filtered your thoughts so you wouldn't be judged. You played roles, different ones for different people, just to fit into spaces that never truly felt like yours. And slowly, something started slipping. Not your success, not your ability, your identity. Because every time you ignored your instincts, every time you chose approval over honesty, every time you stayed quiet when you had something to say, You moved further away from who you really were. And the scary part, it didn't happen all at once. It happened quietly. So quietly that one day you woke up and felt off. Like you were present, but not real. Like you were moving, but not connected. Like you were living a life that didn't fully belong to you. That feeling, that disconnect. That's what happens when you lose ownership of yourself. Because identity isn't just your name. It's not your job. It's not what people call you. It's what you stand for when no one's watching. It's how you think when there's no influence. It's what you choose when there's no pressure. And somewhere along the way, you stopped choosing. You started reacting. Reacting to expectations. Reacting to fear. Reacting to the need to be accepted. You became adaptable, but not authentic. And there's a difference. Adaptability helps you survive. Authenticity is what makes you feel alive. Without it, everything feels empty. Even success. Even recognition. Because deep down, that's not really you they're seeing. It's a version, a performance. And no matter how convincing that performance is, it never satisfies you. Because something inside you keeps pushing back. A quiet resistance. A discomfort you can't ignore forever. It shows up in moments of silence. In moments when you're alone with your thoughts. In moments where you ask yourself questions you don't have answers to. Who am I really? Not who they expect you to be. Not who you've been pretending to be. But who you are without the mask. That question is uncomfortable because answering it requires something most people avoid. The honesty. Real honesty. The kind that doesn't protect your ego. The kind that doesn't sugarcoat reality. The kind that forces you to admit where you've been hiding. You start seeing it clearly. The times you stayed small to avoid conflict. The times you agreed just to be accepted. The times you silenced your own voice. And for a moment, it stings. Because you realize you didn't lose yourself. You abandoned yourself. Not intentionally. Not out of weakness. But out of survival. You thought fitting in would protect you. You thought being liked would give you security. You thought avoiding rejection was the safest path, but safety came at a cost. And that cost was you. So now comes the shift. Not loud, not dramatic, but powerful. You decided to take yourself back. Not the version shaped by others. The real one. The one that has opinions. The one that has standards. The one that doesn't agree with everything just to keep peace. And it starts small. You speak when you would have stayed quiet. You say no when you would have said yes. You express what you actually think, even if it's uncomfortable. At first, it feels strange, unfamiliar, almost wrong. Because you're breaking patterns you've followed for so long. But that discomfort, that's growth. That's you stepping out of a version that was never fully yours. And as you keep going, something begins to rebuild. Trust, not in others, in yourself. Because every time you act in alignment with who you really are, you strengthen that connection. You start respecting your own voice. You start valuing your own thoughts. You start realizing that your identity doesn't need approval to be valid. And that changes everything. You stop chasing validation because you're no longer unsure of who you are. You stop over-explaining yourself because you don't feel the need to justify your existence. You stop bending for everyone because you understand that not everyone is meant to align with you. And that's okay, because identity isn't about being accepted by everyone. It's about being real with yourself, even if it costs you, even if it means some people walk away, even if it means standing alone for a while, because being alone as yourself is still stronger than being surrounded as someone you're not. And here's where it gets powerful. The more you reclaim your identity, the more clarity you gain. Decisions become easier because you're not guessing what feels right. Boundaries become stronger because you're not afraid to protect your space. Your direction becomes clearer because you're not following noise anymore. You're following truth, your truth, and no one can define that for you. Not your past, not your mistakes, not other people's opinions, because identity isn't fixed. It's built, refined, strengthened over time, through experience, through awareness, through the courage to choose yourself again and again. And once you fully step into that, You become unshakable in a different way. Not aggressive, not defensive, just certain. Certain of who you are, certain of what you stand for, certain of what you will and won't tolerate. And that certainty, that's what people notice. Not because you're trying to stand out, but because you're no longer trying to blend in. There's no confusion in your presence anymore. No hesitation, no pretending, just clarity. And clarity is powerful because it commands respect without asking for it. It creates distance where needed. It attracts the right people. It filters out the wrong ones, all without force. That's what happens when you reclaim your identity. You stop searching for yourself and start standing as yourself. Fully, unapologetically, without needing permission. So if you feel lost, if you feel disconnected, if you feel like you've been playing a role for too long, good. That awareness, that's the beginning, because you can't reclaim something until you realize it's missing. Now you know. Now you see it. Now the only question left is, are you ready to stop performing and finally become who you were meant to be? Fear has always been misunderstood. People think it's something to avoid, something to eliminate, something that disappears when you become strong enough. But fear doesn't disappear. It evolves. It watches you. It studies your patterns. It learns where you hesitate, where you doubt, where you pull back. And every time you step toward something bigger, it shows up again. Not to stop you, but to test you. Most people fail that test before it even begins. They feel fear and they retreat. They feel uncertainty and they overthink. They feel pressure and they shrink. And then they tell themselves a story. I'm not ready. This isn't for me. Maybe later. But that's not truth. That's protection. Because fear isn't just about danger. It's about exposure. Exposure of your limits. Exposure of your potential. Exposure of what happens if you actually try and can't hide anymore. So instead of facing it, people build comfortable cages, safe routines, predictable environments, controlled risks. And from the outside it looks stable. But inside it's quiet frustration. Because deep down, they know they're capable of more. But they've chosen comfort over confrontation. You didn't. Or at least, something inside you refuses to. That's why fear hits you harder. That's why it feels louder. Because you're standing closer to the edge. Closer to change. Closer to growth. Closer to becoming someone you've never been before. And fear doesn't like that. Because growth requires uncertainty. And uncertainty removes control. So fear tries to convince you to step back. It whispers, what if you fail? What if they judge you? What if you're not enough? And if you listen, you stay exactly where you are. But here's the shift most people never make. Fear isn't a signal to stop. It's a signal that you're moving in the right direction. Because fear doesn't show up when you're playing small. It shows up when you're about to break your own limits. Think about it. You don't feel fear doing things you've mastered. You don't feel fear staying in familiar patterns. You feel fear when you step into the unknown. And the unknown, that's where everything is. Opportunity, growth, transformation. So the real question isn't how to eliminate fear. It's how to use it. Because fear is energy, just like pain. Uncontrolled, it paralyzes you. Directed, it sharpens you. When your heart starts racing, when your mind starts questioning everything, when your body feels that tension, that's not weakness. That's preparation. Your system is waking up. Your awareness is increasing. Your focus is narrowing. But if you misinterpret it, you freeze. If you understand it, you move. That's the difference. The people who stay stuck feel fear and stop. The people who grow feel fear and act. Not because they're fearless, but because they've trained themselves to move anyway. And that training, it's built one decision at a time. The first time you speak when your voice wants to shake. The first time you take a risk when your mind says don't. The first time you step forward when everything inside you says stay back. It's uncomfortable. It's messy. It doesn't feel powerful, but it is. Because every time you act despite fear, you weaken its control. Not by destroying it, but by proving it wrong. You show yourself that fear doesn't define your limits. It only tests them. And over time, something changes. Fear doesn't disappear, but it loses authority. It stops controlling your actions. It stops dictating your choices. It becomes background noise, still there, still present, but no longer in charge. And that's where you become different. Because now you're not avoiding fear. You're walking with it. You feel it and move anyway. You hear it and don't obey. You face it and don't collapse. And that creates something powerful. Presence. Not loud confidence. Not forced bravery, but calm control. The kind of control that makes people pause. Because they can sense it. That you're not reacting. That you're not panicking. That you're not trying to escape pressure. You're standing in it. Comfortably. And that's rare. Because most people spend their lives trying to avoid discomfort. But you've learned how to exist inside it. And that's what shifts the dynamic. Because now, you're not the one being controlled by fear. You're the one controlling your response to it. And that changes how people see you. Not because you're trying to be intimidating, but because unpredictability creates tension. And nothing is more unpredictable than someone who doesn't react the way they're expected to. When people expect hesitation, you act. When they expect fear, you stay calm. When they expect you to fold, you hold your ground. That's where the fear factor is born. Not from aggression, not from dominance, but from control, from composure, from the ability to stay steady in situations where others break. And that doesn't just affect how others see you. It transforms how you see yourself. Because once you realize you can face fear, once you prove to yourself that it doesn't stop you, you stop doubting your own capacity. You stop questioning every move. You start trusting your actions. And trust, that's where real confidence comes from. Not from success, not from validation, but from evidence. Evidence that you can handle pressure. Evidence that you can move through uncertainty. Evidence that you can face what scares you and not collapse. That's power. Not the absence of fear, but mastery over it. So the next time fear shows up, don't run. Don't silence it. Don't pretend it's not there. Listen. Understand what it's pointing at. Because behind every fear, there's something important. Something that matters. Something that has the potential to change you. And if it scares you, good. That means it's not small. That means it's not comfortable. That means it's worth it. So step forward with the doubt, with the tension, and move anyway. Because fear will always be part of the journey. But control is a choice. And the moment you choose to act despite fear is the moment you become someone others can't predict, can't control, and can't ignore. Your mind is always talking, even now. A constant stream of thoughts, some loud, some subtle, some pushing you forward, others pulling you back. And most of the time, you don't even question it. You just listen. You treat every thought like it's true. Every doubt like it's a warning. Every fear like it's a fact. That's where the problem begins. Because your mind isn't designed to make you powerful. It's designed to keep you safe. And safety doesn't require growth. It requires control, predictability, familiar patterns. So your mind creates stories that sound logical but limit you. Don't take that risk. You might fail. What will people think? You're not ready yet. And the more you listen, the more those thoughts become your reality. Not because they're true, but because you never challenged them. That's how people get stuck. Not because they lack ability, but because they've handed control over to a voice that was never meant to lead. Mastering your mind starts with one realization. You are not your thoughts. You are the one observing them. That difference? It changes everything. Because if you can observe a thought, you can question it. If you can question it, you can decide whether to believe it. And if you can decide, you take back control. But this isn't easy, because your mind is fast, automatic. It reacts before you even realize what's happening. A situation appears and instantly a thought follows. Judgment, assumption, fear. And if you're not aware, you react. Without thinking, without choosing, without control. That's the default state. Reaction. But mastering the mind means breaking that pattern. It means slowing things down. Not the world, but your response to it. When something happens, you pause, just for a moment, long enough to notice. What am I thinking right now? Not what's happening, not what others are doing, but what's going on inside you. Because that's where everything starts. Your thoughts shape your emotions. Your emotions shape your actions. Your actions shape your results. So if your thoughts are uncontrolled, everything that follows will be too. And here's the truth. Your mind will lie to you. Not intentionally, but consistently. It will exaggerate problems. It will predict worst-case scenarios. It will remind you of past failures as if they define your future. And if you believe it, you limit yourself before you even try. So you have to challenge it.
Not emotionally, logically.
When your mind says, "You're not good enough," ask, "Based on what?" When it says, "You'll fail," ask, "Is that certain or just possible?" When it says, "This is too hard," ask, "Or is this just unfamiliar?" Those questions create space. Space between you and the thought. And in that space, you regain power. Because now you're not reacting, you're choosing. And choice, that's where control lives. But mastering your mind isn't just about stopping negative thoughts. It's about directing them. Because your mind needs focus. If you don't give it one, it will find its own. And usually, that focus is on problems. What's wrong? What's missing? What could go wrong? So you have to train it, just like you would train your body. Through repetition, through consistency, through discipline. You choose what to focus on. Not blindly positive thinking, not ignoring reality, but intentional thinking. Instead of focusing on what you can't control, you focus on what you can, your actions, your effort, your response. Instead of replaying mistakes, you extract lessons. Instead of dwelling on fear, you prepare. That shift doesn't eliminate challenges, but it changes how you experience them. Because now you're not overwhelmed, you're engaged. There's a difference. Overwhelm comes from feeling powerless. Engagement comes from taking responsibility. And responsibility, that's where strength is built. Not blame, not guilt, but ownership. This is my mind. These are my thoughts. This is my response. And once you take ownership, you stop being controlled by external situations. Because no matter what happens outside, you have control over what happens inside. That doesn't mean you won't feel emotions. You will. Anger, frustration, doubt. But now you don't get lost in them. You observe them. You understand them. You let them pass without letting them dictate your actions. That's control, not suppression, not denial, but awareness. And awareness grows with practice. The more you notice your thoughts, the more you understand your patterns, the more you understand your triggers, the more you understand yourself. And self-understanding, that's power. Because now nothing catches you off guard. You recognize when your mind is trying to pull you back. You recognize when fear is disguised as logic. You recognize when doubt is trying to slow you down. And instead of falling into it, you step back. You reset. You choose again. That's the process. Over and over. Not perfect, not instant, but consistent. And over time, something changes. Your mind becomes quieter. Not silent, but chaotic. More focused. You stop overthinking every decision. You stop reacting to every emotion. You stop being pulled in every direction. Because now you're leading. Your thoughts follow you, not the other way around. And that's where real strength shows up. Not in what you say, not in what you show, but in how you think. Because when your mind is controlled, everything else becomes easier. Decisions become sharper. Actions become more intentional. Emotions become more manageable. You're no longer scattered. You're aligned. And alignment, that's powerful. Because now your thoughts, actions, and direction are working together. No conflict, no hesitation, just movement forward. So when negativity shows up, it doesn't take over. When doubt appears, it doesn't stop you. When pressure builds, it doesn't break you. Because your mind is no longer your weakness. It's your weapon. Sharpened through awareness, strengthened through discipline, controlled through choice. And once you reach that point, you realize something most people never do. The biggest battle was never outside. It was always inside. And now, You're not fighting it anymore. You're mastering it.